I was reading this story, man, and this one's just so brutal. Family heartbroken after stunning girl, 20, collapses and dies suddenly in her dad's arm after heart attack. Paramedics battled for an hour and a half to save Libby Peverall's life after she suddenly became ill. A lot of stories when you Google died suddenly. If you go to Google and type in died suddenly, you'll see a lot of stories. I can't tell you why. I know there's a lot of people who think it's related to the vaccines. I can't tell you why. I often talk about how perhaps it's related to COVID. Perhaps it's related to a bunch of other factors. Who knows? Maybe even climate change. Now, you can make your decision for yourself as to what you think is going on based on what you read. Talk to a medical professional who can answer your legitimate questions and knows about what's going on. All that really needs to be said right now, and the message that needs to get out, is that if you Google died suddenly or dies suddenly, you will see an insane amount of stories. You'll see stories of young athletes dropping dead. And I don't know why. I know. We all have our suspicions. Many of you believe. But of course, the media is going to come out and tell you that it's climate change, or perhaps the news story is, simply put, erythritol, artificial sweetener linked to blood clots and heart attacks, new study finds. A new study found that erythritol, a sugar substitute, is linked to blood clotting, stroke, heart attack, and death for people who had pre-existing risk factors for heart disease. Well, that explains it. It wasn't climate change. These athletes are on the keto diet trying to stay thin, and they're eating a lot of erythritol in their snacks, and it's causing their brains to hemorrhagic strokes. Is that what it is? When like a blood vessel bursts in your brain or something like that? Well, that's what they're saying now. And I'll tell you right off the bat, I wouldn't doubt it, man. The idea that there is a sweetener that is non-caloric, this kind of stuff always freaks me out. You know, I've been doing low sugar for a while, and I just try to generally eat healthier. I'm trying to fight a sneeze. Forgive me. But I'm not a fan of this stuff. I'm not a fan of the weird chemicals that go in your food. I'd rather eat regular sugar and just, exercise and take vitamins and stuff like that. But anyway, let's get to this story right here, because I want you to hear it. I want you to experience this story because, man, it almost brought me to tears. And I really do mean it. This is important stuff. Whatever you think about what's going on with people dying suddenly, we need to get to the bottom of it and figure out exactly what's going on and be prepared for more. Here's the story from My London News. A family has been left heartbroken after a beautiful young girl collapsed and died suddenly in her dad's arms, despite his best efforts to try and save her life. Libby Peverall, who was just 20 years old, was not known to have any underlying health conditions when she suddenly passed away in traumatic scenes at her family home in West Drayton on February 20th. Libby, who had aspirations of becoming a beautician, was described to My London as loved by all who knew her, and her shocking death has devastated her parents and her brother. They are now raising money through a GoFundMe. Speaking to My London, her brother said she was a beautiful girl, etc. So I'm not going to read all that stuff. I want to get you to the story. While she had suffered no previous medical episodes aside from her mental health, she collapsed last week with the family still awaiting an explanation as to how she died. Charlie said, "She woke up on Monday, and my dad said, 'Do you want a cup of coffee?' She always had coffee in the morning, and she said she'd rather have a cup of tea. So he made her a cup of tea, and then all of a sudden she said, 'I've got a pain in my chest.' She suffers from panic attacks, so my dad gave her a brown bag to blow in, and basically, she just stood up and then collapsed in my dad's arms. My dad really did try his hardest to help her, and he did CPR on her, everything. He tried so hard. Within about 5 or 10 minutes, ambulances turned up, and they tried on her for about an hour and a half while my mom and dad going, 'Please don't give up on her. Please, please don't give up.' Charlie received a call a short while later to say that Libby was suffering a suspected heart attack and was no longer breathing. He jumped in the car and reached St. Albans when his mom told him that she'd sadly passed away. I screamed in the car. It hit me so hard. We did everything together. We did football together. And just before Christmas, we went to Winter Wonderland together. She was my only sibling, and everyone says, I know how you feel, but until it happens to someone, which I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy, you don't know how it feels. My mom is in bits. I'm trying to stay strong for her, and it feels like I haven't properly grieved yet. It just feels like she's on holiday, and she's going to walk through the door soon. For the last 2 days, it's starting to feel like a reality, like reality a bit. I'm just trying to deny it in a way. There's another story. Who is Jamie Kale, ex-U.S. champion swimmer who died in U.S. Virgin Islands? Walk into a room, and there she is, the 42-year-old former athlete, dead, just collapsed on the floor. A lot of stories like this. What's behind the rise in heart attacks among young people? I don't know. Don't look at me. I'm not a doctor. I don't have all the answers for you. But I want you to imagine this. Many of you probably can't. Maybe you don't have kids. So imagine someone you love and care about. Maybe it is your daughter. Maybe it's a sister or a cousin or a niece or a nephew or a best friend, significant other, or your kid. And I want you to imagine that you're just standing in your kitchen when all of a sudden they scowl, start rubbing their chest, and then collapse on the ground in front of you. And the only thing you can do is desperately pound on their chest, begging to God that they don't die. And to the fathers out there, I could not imagine the horror. One of the most horrifying sounds I've ever heard was a father holding his son as his son died. It's a truly nerve-wracking sound. Man. You know, the world can be cold and callous. It churns about. Nature cycles through, not caring one bit as animals trip and fall, break a leg, and then die on the spot to be eaten by wolves. Nature can be brutal, man. And it doesn't care for you. It doesn't care if you live or die. But we're humans, and we live in the human experience. And other humans are our world. That's it. As much as they're also our enemies. I couldn't imagine the pain of being someone who dealt with one of these stories of an individual dying suddenly. And I want you to imagine that you're on the ground, pumping away at the chest of the person you care about the most, and you know deep down that no matter how hard you try, they are likely going to die. The reason I want you to imagine that is so you can understand the pain of these families. You can try and imagine that and feel that so that you can understand why it's so important we truly figure out why people are dying suddenly so much right now. Now, I know many of you would believe you have the answers. Maybe we should have some kind of hearings and we should get some studies done, some independent studies. Maybe Rand Paul can hold some kind of committee hearing in Health and Human Services or something like that. Question some individuals to try and figure out why so many people are just dropping dead. Cardiometabolic Institute. What's behind the rise in heart attacks among young people? What is happening that's causing 20 to 30-year-olds to have so many heart attacks? Because the idea now is more fathers will be holding on to their children as they watch their children die. More mothers, all the same. They say not long ago, heart attacks were primarily a problem faced by older adults. It was rare for anyone younger than 40 to have a heart attack. Now, 1 in 5 heart attack patients are younger than 40 years of age. Here's another troubling fact to highlight the problem. Having a heart attack in your 20s or early 30s is more common. Between the years 2000 and 2016, the heart attack rate increased by 2% every year in this young age group. Your outlook isn't better following a heart attack just because you're younger. Patients who have had heart attacks in their 20s or 30s face the same risks as older patients. Once you have that first heart attack, you'll have the same chance of dying from a second major heart event or a stroke, regardless of your age. And they say obesity, being overweight, cigarettes, hypertension, etc., all of these things play a role. Substance abuse, perhaps. Brigham Health Hub says, why are heart attacks striking younger people? My question is, how come we're only hearing about it in the past couple of years? I did this. I went on Google and I typed in died suddenly, but I set a time gate. Only show me articles from 2019 and prior. What did I find? I don't know. Died suddenly was a phrase that appeared a couple times, a few times every 6 months or so. Some you'd see the phrase twice within 1 year. I did a search for it after 2020, and all of a sudden it's just like every single day there's 2 or 3 or more. You know, I saw this story about Jamie Kale, who died suddenly. They have no explanation for her death. They said that I guess it was her boyfriend. Let me see if I can. Her boyfriend, in the early hours of February 21st, went to check on her at their home and found her on the floor. Now, for all we know, the doctors administered CPR. They were unable to save her. For all we know, this is not. Look, some of these died suddenly. These can be car accidents. They can be people choking on food. And it just says that. Important point. Until they release more information on what happened to this individual, they said she succumbed to her ailment. I don't know what that means. Maybe she had a bad heart already. I don't want people to look at these stories and assume they're all the exact same cause of death. I think the problem is, for some reason, we're seeing the same thing over and over again with these stories. ABC News. Rise in heart disease may be explained by extreme weather conditions. Study. Okay. Climate change, I guess. That's what they've been saying since August. As the temperatures rise, the likelihood that you die goes up. Man, I don't know. Erythritol is actually pretty interesting if this is true, because people are eating a lot more of it and they're trying to get sugar reduced in food. So there's non-keto food that has erythritol now because they're like, well, it's a sugar alcohol. So, it's non-caloric. We can put lower calories on the food item and more people will eat it. I'm not a psychic. I don't know the future and I don't know what's going on. All I know is that it is. And unless people care about it, unless they think about it and imagine what it must be like to experience, we're not going to have anything change. I'd like to see some hearings. I'd like to see perhaps the government, perhaps someone like Rand Paul, putting a report together tracking this, doing the job of going through the data and saying, here's what we found in media compared to other years prior to the pandemic. Here's when we believe it may have started. Put it on a chart. Show us. And then maybe some people can be put under oath and ask some important questions. I'll leave it there. Next segment's coming up at 6 p.m. on this channel. Thanks for hanging out, and I'll see you all then.